Every morning you wake up and go through your routine with your dog. You feed them, you walk them, you give them affection when it's convenient. And in your mind, you're doing everything right. You're a good dog parent. You love them. But here's what most people never realize. In dozens of small moments throughout each day, you're accidentally breaking your dog's heart. Not through cruelty or neglect, through tiny inconsistencies, through misunderstandings, through treating them like small humans instead of the emotionally complex creatures they actually are. And your dog doesn't have the language to tell you. They just absorb it, internalize it, and slowly learn that the world is less predictable than they desperately need it to be. Dogs don't experience hurt the way we do. They don't sulk or hold grudges or write angry letters in their minds. But they do experience something far more devastating: the gradual erosion of trust. Every time their expectations are violated, every time the patterns they've built their entire sense of safety around get disrupted without explanation, something shifts inside them. What looks like resilience, what you interpret as your dog getting over it, is often just a nervous system learning to expect disappointment. And once you understand the specific ways well-meaning dog parents accidentally create this damage, you can't unsee it. Your relationship changes, because you finally start speaking your dog's actual language instead of the one you assumed they understood. Here's one of the most common mistakes, and it's one you probably make without thinking twice about it. Your goodbye rituals are inconsistent. Some mornings you crouch down, you hold your dog's face, you tell them you'll be back soon, you give them a treat. Other mornings you're running late and you just slip out the door while they're distracted. You think you're being flexible, adapting to your schedule, but your dog has built an entire emotional safety system around the pattern of how you leave. Research from behavioral institutes in Norway, where they studied Nordic breeds like elk hounds in rural mountain communities, found that dogs whose owners had inconsistent departure rituals showed cortisol spikes that lasted for hours. Not because they have separation anxiety in the clinical sense, because their early warning system, the one that tells them, this is normal, this is safe, you will return, got disabled. When you sometimes make a big deal of leaving and sometimes don't, your dog can't build a reliable prediction model. They can't settle. Every single departure becomes a potential abandonment, because the signals that used to mean, I'm coming back, have become meaningless. You're not being spontaneous. You're dismantling their emotional scaffolding, one inconsistent goodbye at a time. Watch what happens on your walks, and you'll see another mistake most dog parents make constantly. You interrupt their sniffing. You're on a schedule. You want to get exercise. You pull them away from that fence post they've been investigating for 30 seconds. And in your mind, you're just keeping the walk moving. But here's what you're actually doing. You're ripping your dog out of the primary way they understand and process their world. Sniffing isn't a casual hobby for dogs. It's how they read the news, check their messages, and assess whether their territory is safe. Every scent marker tells a story: who was here, when they were here, what emotional state they were in. When you yank your dog away mid-investigation, it's like someone covering your eyes halfway through reading a crucial text message about your neighborhood's safety. Norwegian researchers studying free-roaming dogs in rural areas found that dogs who were allowed to sniff freely showed lower baseline stress markers throughout the day. Not because sniffing is relaxing in itself, but because it allows them to complete their cognitive work. Your dog needs to finish reading the world. When you constantly interrupt that process because you're impatient, you're teaching them that their need to understand their environment doesn't matter. And dogs who can't complete their sensory processing become anxious dogs, hypervigilant dogs, dogs who never fully settle because they never got to finish the work their brain was designed to do. Here's a mistake that creates genuine cognitive confusion in your dog's mind. You punish behavior you accidentally taught them. When your dog was a puppy, you thought it was adorable when they jumped up to greet you. You laughed. You gave them attention. You reinforced it 100 times without realizing you were training a behavior. Now they're 50 pounds, and jumping isn't cute anymore. So you scold them. You push them down. You turn away. And your dog isn't being stubborn when they keep jumping. They're experiencing something close to betrayal. The rules changed, and nobody explained why. Dogs don't understand the concept of, you're too big for this now. They understand pattern and consequence. For months or years, jumping equaled affection and approval. Now, suddenly, it equals rejection and anger. That's not a training challenge. That's cognitive dissonance that feels, to your dog, like the foundation of your relationship has become unreliable. Behaviorists in Oslo who work with rescue dogs found that the most common source of anxiety in rehomed dogs wasn't abuse. It was inconsistent reinforcement in their previous homes. Dogs who never knew which behaviors would be rewarded and which would be punished developed a kind of learned helplessness. They stopped trying to understand the rules because the rules kept changing. When you punish what you previously rewarded, you're not teaching your dog self-control. You're teaching them that your approval is arbitrary and unpredictable. Many dog parents use crates, and that's fine. Crates can be wonderful safe spaces when introduced correctly. But here's where the mistake happens. You use their crate as punishment. Your dog destroys something while you're gone, and you put them in their crate with a stern voice and closed door. You think you're giving a timeout. You think you're teaching consequences. But what you're actually doing is poisoning the one space that was supposed to be unconditionally safe. Research from veterinary behaviorists in Norway found that dogs whose crates were used punitively showed elevated stress markers, increased heart rates, even when entering their crates voluntarily months later. The association doesn't fade quickly. Your dog's crate was supposed to be their den, their sanctuary, the place where nothing bad ever happens. When you turn it into a place they're sent as punishment, you remove the only truly safe space they had. And dogs without safe spaces become dogs who can't fully relax anywhere. They're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always monitoring for signs that this comfortable moment might suddenly become uncomfortable. You didn't mean to create chronic vigilance. But that's what happens when you take away the one place your dog didn't have to earn safety. There's a game many dog parents play that they think is harmless fun. The fake throw. You wind up, you mimic the throwing motion, but you keep the ball in your hand. Your dog tears off across the yard, realizes there's nothing there, comes back confused. And you laugh. It seems innocent. It seems playful. But here's what's happening in your dog's brain. They release anticipation neurochemicals, dopamine and adrenaline, preparing for the joy of the chase. Then those chemicals crash into confusion when the expected reward doesn't exist. It's not funny to your dog. It's a betrayal of the trust game you've built together. Play between dogs and humans isn't just physical exercise. It's a language of reliability. I do this, you do that. We both know what comes next. When you introduce deception into play, even playful deception, you teach your dog that your signals can't be trusted. Norwegian trainers working with hunting dogs found that dogs whose owners frequently used fake-outs during retrieve training became hesitant, less enthusiastic, more likely to second-guess commands. They didn't lose their drive. They lost their faith that the game had consistent rules. Your dog wants to trust that when you wind up to throw, something will be thrown. That's not naivety. That's the foundation of cooperative play. And when you mock that trust for your own amusement, you're chipping away at something far more valuable than a laugh. Not all dogs are social butterflies, and that's perfectly okay. But here's a mistake dog parents make constantly: forced socialization with dogs their dog clearly dislikes. You're at the park, another dog approaches. Your dog's body language is screaming discomfort. Stiff posture, whale eye, turning away. But the other owner says their dog is friendly, and you don't want to seem rude or overprotective, so you let the interaction happen. Your dog tolerates it. They don't snap or fight, and you think, see? It was fine. But it wasn't fine. Your dog just learned that their communication doesn't matter. They told you, in every way they know how, that they didn't want this interaction. And you ignored them. Dogs are sophisticated communicators, but only if we're sophisticated enough to listen. When you repeatedly override your dog's clearly expressed boundaries because you're worried about being polite to other humans, you teach your dog that their voice is irrelevant. Research on canine stress responses in Scandinavia found that dogs who were regularly forced into unwanted social interactions showed increased reactivity over time, not decreased. They didn't learn to like other dogs. They learned that their owners wouldn't protect them, so they'd have to protect themselves. That's how fear-based aggression develops. Not from one traumatic incident, but from dozens of small moments where a dog tried to say, I'm uncomfortable, and nobody listened. Here's a mistake that breaks dogs' hearts in a way most owners never recognize. When you're upset, stressed, grieving, overwhelmed, you push your dog away. You need space. You need to process alone. And your dog approaches you, trying to offer comfort, trying to do the job they've spent their entire life training for. And you say, "Not now," or you physically move them away. You think you're setting healthy boundaries. But your dog doesn't understand human emotional withdrawal. They don't think, "My human needs solitude to process complex emotions." They think, "I have failed at my primary purpose, which is understanding and helping you." Dogs are social healers by evolutionary design. Their entire nervous system is wired to attune to your emotional state and attempt to regulate it. When you reject that offering, especially during the moments when you're most distressed, your dog experiences something close to existential failure. Norwegian studies on working therapy dogs found that dogs whose emotional support attempts were frequently rejected by their handlers showed signs of secondary stress, almost like emotional burnout. They didn't stop caring. They started doubting their ability to help. Your dog doesn't need you to perform happiness when you're sad, but they do need you to let them sit nearby, to let them offer their quiet presence. Because that presence is how they love you. And when you push it away, you're not protecting them from your pain. You're telling them their love isn't welcome. Which of these mistakes did you recognize in yourself, and which one surprised you most? Because here's what matters. These mistakes come from love, not cruelty. You're not a bad dog parent. You're a human trying to understand a being who experiences the world completely differently than you do. But dogs experience impact, not intention. They don't know you meant well. They only know how it felt. And small changes in awareness can rebuild trust faster than you think. Your dog is still watching you, still trying to understand the rules, still hoping the world will become predictable again. Because your dog's emotional world is just as real as yours, and it deserves to be protected. Stay for the second part where we explore the deeper wounds, the ones that take months and years to develop, the patterns that erode security so slowly you don't notice until your dog has become someone different than they used to be. Some mistakes show up immediately. Your dog flinches, retreats, shows you in real time that something hurt. But the mistakes that cause the deepest damage are the ones that work slowly, invisibly, like water wearing away stone. These are the patterns that don't break trust in a single moment. They dissolve it gradually, over months and years, until one day you look at your dog and realize they've become anxious, clingy, or emotionally distant, and you have no idea why. Because you never saw the erosion happening. You just woke up one day and the foundation was gone. Your life changes. New job, new baby, new home, new schedule. And you adapt within days because humans are cognitive and we can rationalize change. We tell ourselves stories about why things are different, and those stories help us adjust. Your dog doesn't have that capability. When their entire routine shifts without transition, their nervous system goes into prolonged stress response. You now leave for work 2 hours earlier than you used to. You now feed them at different times. The walks happen at unpredictable hours. And you think your dog will just figure it out, will just adapt, because change is part of life. But research from Norwegian institutes studying seasonal work patterns in Arctic breeds found that routine disruption affects canine emotional regulation for 3 to 6 weeks minimum. That's not stubbornness, that's biology. Your dog's circadian rhythms, their cortisol patterns, their entire sense of when safety happens throughout the day, all of that is built on repetition and prediction. When you change everything at once without gradual transition, you're asking your dog's nervous system to function in chaos. They don't understand that the new schedule is permanent. Every morning feels like an anomaly. Every evening feels uncertain. And dogs who live in chronic uncertainty become dogs who can't settle, who follow you from room to room, who develop separation anxiety not because they love you too much, but because they can no longer predict when you'll be available and when you won't. You didn't mean to create anxiety, but you changed the architecture of their world without giving them time to adjust to the new blueprint. When someone leaves your household, whether it's a family member moving out, a divorce, a death, a roommate who takes their dog with them, you process that loss through conversation, through understanding, through closure rituals that help you integrate the absence. Your dog processes loss through scent memory. And when you immediately remove every trace of the being who left, when you wash their bedding, pack their belongings, erase their smell from the house within days, you're denying your dog the only form of closure they have access to. Dogs don't understand explanations. They understand olfactory evidence. That person or animal was here, their scent was everywhere, and now it's gone, and your dog never got to gradually accept the disappearance. Behavioral researchers in Norway studying grief responses in sled dog teams found that dogs whose packmates died showed significantly less prolonged stress when they were allowed access to the deceased dog's resting place and belongings for several weeks. They would sniff, lie near the items, and slowly the frequency of those visits would decrease as they processed the loss. When you remove all evidence too quickly, you don't spare your dog from grief. You trap them in confusion. They're not looking for the missing being because they don't understand. They're looking because the scent trail was interrupted and their brain needs to finish the story. Your dog needs time to realize that the scent is fading, that the absence is permanent, that it's safe to stop searching. And when you deny them that process, their grief has nowhere to go except into anxiety and attachment disruption. Your dog barks at the door, jumps on visitors, mounts other dogs at the park, humps pillows at home, and you're embarrassed. You correct them constantly. You say no, you redirect, you punish what you see as socially inappropriate behavior. But here's what you're actually doing. You're teaching your dog that their attempts to communicate don't matter. Because those behaviors aren't just bad manners, they're language. Barking at the door is your dog saying, "Something has changed in our territory, and I need to alert the pack." Mounting is often about anxiety or overstimulation, not dominance or sexuality. Humping objects is a self-soothing behavior, like a child sucking their thumb. When you constantly shut down these communications without addressing the underlying emotional state, your dog doesn't stop needing to communicate. They stop trying. They learn that their voice is unwelcome. Research from Oslo Cognition Labs found that dogs whose natural communication attempts were heavily suppressed showed increased stress markers and often developed redirected behaviors like excessive licking, pacing, or destructive chewing. The anxiety didn't disappear. It just found new, less obvious outlets. Your dog isn't trying to embarrass you. They're trying to tell you something about their internal state. And when you silence them without listening, you create a being who suffers quietly because they've learned that speaking doesn't help. You buy your dog expensive puzzle toys, elaborate feeding systems, subscription boxes full of enrichment. And these things are fine, they're not harmful. But here's the mistake. You're replacing your presence with products. You think that $30 puzzle feeder is meeting your dog's intellectual needs. But dogs are social learners. They don't want to solve problems alone. They want to solve problems with you. Research from Norwegian universities studying canine cognition found that when given the choice between interactive play with their owner or solo enrichment activities, dogs chose interactive play 87% of the time, even when the solo activity offered higher value treats. It's not about the challenge. It's about the connection. When you consistently substitute expensive toys for quality time, when you hand your dog a puzzle and walk away instead of engaging together, you're teaching them that your attention is scarce and must be earned through independent entertainment. Your dog doesn't want to be entertained. They want to be with you. That 15 minutes you spend sitting on the floor working through a training game together is worth more to your dog's emotional health than any expensive toy they unwrap alone. You can't purchase your way out of the fundamental truth that your dog is a social being whose primary enrichment is you. Something bad happens. Another dog attacks yours at the park. A vet visit goes traumatically wrong. Your dog gets lost for several hours before you find them. And in the moment, you comfort them. You hold them. You tell them it's okay. Then you move on. Life continues. And you assume your dog has moved on too because they seem fine. They eat normally. They play. They don't show obvious signs of lasting distress. But trauma doesn't work that way in dogs. They don't rationalize experiences. They don't tell themselves, "That was a one-time event. I'm safe now." Traumatic experiences get encoded in their threat assessment systems and stay there. influencing behavior in ways you might not connect to the original incident. Your dog who was attacked might now show aggression toward dogs who look similar to the attacker. Your dog who had a painful vet experience might start showing fear responses to cars, to certain smells, to being handled in specific ways. Norwegian studies on working dogs who experienced singular traumatic events found that without intentional counterconditioning and gradual rehabilitation, those fear responses often intensified over time rather than fading. Your dog isn't being dramatic. They're carrying a wound in their nervous system that hasn't healed, and assuming they'll just get over it is like assuming a person with PTSD will spontaneously recover without intervention. Your dog needs help processing what happened. They need careful, patient exposure that rebuilds their sense of safety. And when you ignore the lingering effects of trauma because your dog seems functional on the surface, you allow that wound to calcify into permanent fear. Pay attention to how you handle departures versus arrivals. Many dog parents make their exits dramatic. They crouch down, they give long goodbyes, they make leaving emotionally significant. Then they come home and they're distracted. They're on their phone. They acknowledge the dog briefly and move on with their evening. You think you're helping your dog cope with separation by making leaving feel important, but you're actually teaching them that departure is emotionally bigger than reunion. Research on canine separation anxiety in Scandinavia found that dogs whose owners celebrated departures but remained neutral during arrivals showed higher anxiety during alone time. Because the message your dog receives is that being apart from you is more significant than being together. Your dog's anxiety isn't about you leaving. It's about not knowing if you'll be emotionally present when you return. When you flip this pattern, when you make departures calm and boring, but arrivals genuinely warm and engaged, you teach your dog that reunion is what matters. That separation is temporary and unremarkable. That the meaningful moment is coming back together. Your dog doesn't need you to perform goodbye rituals. They need you to show them that hello is always guaranteed. You watch another dog at the park, calm and obedient, and you say to your own dog, "Why can't you be like that? Why can't you just relax?" You think you're expressing frustration, but your dog doesn't hear words. They hear emotional tone. They sense disappointment. And what they learn is that who they fundamentally are isn't enough for you. Norwegian trainers who work with independent Nordic breeds like Lunda Huns and Norwegian Elkhounds found that comparison-based training created learned helplessness, not improvement. Dogs who are constantly measured against other dogs stopped trying to please their owners because they'd internalized that their efforts would always fall short. Your dog isn't another dog. They're not supposed to be. They have their own temperament, their own personality, their own way of moving through the world. When you compare them to other dogs, you're rejecting their authentic self. And dogs who feel fundamentally rejected by their owners become either anxiously people-pleasing or emotionally shut down. Neither is healthy. Your dog needs to know that you accept them as they are, that your love isn't conditional on them becoming someone different. Have you noticed any of these patterns affecting your dog's trust or anxiety? What changes will you make starting today? Because here's the truth. You're not a perfect dog parent. Nobody is. These mistakes happen because we're human, because we project our emotional logic onto beings who operate entirely differently. But awareness is the first step toward repair. Your dog doesn't need perfection. They need consistency. They need patience. They need you to learn their language instead of demanding they learn yours. Every dog deserves an owner who sees them clearly, who honors their emotional reality, and who loves them in the language they actually speak. Subscribe for more truths about the beings who love us most faithfully, who forgive us endlessly, and who deserve our very best effort at understanding.